My grandmother Mary raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. Meanwhile, my Uncle Frank spent years mocking my poverty mentality and lack of ambition while flaunting his wealth. When Grandma passed away, everyone gathered at the lawyer's office. Uncle Frank was already discussing his plans for her modest-seeming estate, but then came the bombshell. Grandma had secretly amassed $3.1 million, and the lawyer was looking straight at me. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever had someone underestimate your worth. This is how justice unfolded. My earliest memory of my parents is somewhat hazy now, softened by time and shadowed by tragedy. I remember my father Burton tossing me high in the air, while my mother Sarah laughed from the porch of our small suburban home. I was 7 years old when their car was hit by a drunk driver on a rainy April night. Neither survived the impact. In an instant, my world shattered, and I found myself orphaned with only my grandmother Mary to take me in. Grandma Mary lived in a modest 2-bedroom bungalow in Lakeville, Minnesota. She had been widowed herself 10 years earlier when my grandfather passed from a heart attack. Her house smelled of cinnamon and old books, with handmade quilts draped over worn but comfortable furniture. The backyard had an ancient oak tree with a tire swing that would become my sanctuary in the difficult months that followed. Sometimes life gives us more than we think we can handle, Burton, she told me, on my first night there, tucking me into the bed that would become mine in the small second bedroom. But we find our strength along the way. Her gentle hand smoothed my hair, and though nothing could fill the void left by my parents, her unwavering love provided a foundation I could rebuild upon. My Uncle Frank, my father's older brother, lived across town in a sprawling house with his wife Diane and their 2 children. My cousins Allison and Trevor, where Grandma's home was humble and welcoming. Uncle Frank's residence was all about showcasing his success as a real estate developer. Marble countertops, high ceilings, expensive artwork, and a 3-car garage housing luxury vehicles announced to everyone that Frank Walker had made it. From the beginning, Uncle Frank made it clear he thought taking me in was a burden his mother should not have to bear. "Mom, you are 65 years old," he argued during one of his infrequent visits about a month after I moved in. "You should be enjoying retirement, not raising another child. We have plenty of room. Burton could come live with us." But Grandma Mary stood firm. "Burton stays with me. He has lost enough without being uprooted again." What Uncle Frank never acknowledged was that his offer was more about appearances than genuine concern. He had never been particularly close to my father, whom he considered the underachiever of the family. My dad had been a high school science teacher, passionate about education but never wealthy. Frank seemed to measure everyone's worth by their financial success, and by that metric my father had fallen short. As for me, I was just another extension of what Frank considered my father's inadequacy. "The boy needs to learn the value of hard work and ambition," he would say, when he thought I could not hear. "Look at Sarah and Michael. Nice people, sure, but no drive, no vision. Now he will grow up with the same small-town mentality." Despite Uncle Frank's disapproval, Grandma Mary created a loving home for me. She was not wealthy by any means. She had worked as a librarian for 35 years before retiring, living on her modest pension and Social Security. We clipped coupons together before grocery shopping. She taught me to mend clothes rather than buy new ones, and to appreciate simple pleasures like homemade ice cream on the back porch or fishing at the nearby lake. Every Sunday, Frank and his family would come for dinner, a tradition Grandma insisted on maintaining. These dinners became a weekly exercise in subtle humiliation. Uncle Frank would arrive in his latest luxury car, his family dressed in designer clothes. He would spend the evening regaling us with stories of his latest business triumph or expensive vacation. "We just got back from Aspen," he might announce, helping himself to more of Grandma's pot roast. "Trevor is really taking to skiing." Of course, private lessons make all the difference. Diane would chime in. "We are thinking about getting a summer home on Lake Minnetonka next year." The connections you make at the yacht club are just invaluable for business. All while Grandma and I sat in clothes from discount stores in a house with outdated appliances and worn carpeting. I noticed how Grandma would sometimes look around her home with a flash of something like embarrassment when Frank criticized the dated fixtures or inefficient heating system she really should upgrade. My cousins absorbed their parents' attitudes. Trevor, 3 years older than me, made it clear he considered himself superior. He would describe his private school exploits and expensive hobbies, then ask with mock innocence about my public school experience, feigning interest, while actually highlighting the disparity. "So, Burton, do you guys even have a science lab at your school?" he might ask, knowing full well the answer. "That is too bad." At Lakeside Prep, we each have our own electron microscope for biology. Allison, closer to my age, was less deliberately cruel, but equally conditioned to view wealth as the ultimate measure of success. She would complain about having to go to Paris for spring break when she really wanted to go to Bali. Through it all, Grandma Mary remained dignified. Different choices lead to different paths. "Burton," she would tell me after they left, "Frank chose his path. Your father chose a different one. Neither is wrong, just different." What none of us realized during those years was that Grandma Mary had her own secret. Behind her frugal exterior and modest living, she was quietly building something none of us could have imagined. As I entered my teenage years, Uncle Frank's criticism extended directly to me. When I expressed interest in following my father's footsteps into education, Frank scoffed. "Teaching you will never make any real money that way, Burton. Why not consider real estate? I could show you the ropes, help you make something of yourself." His offer sounded generous, but the underlying message was clear. My aspirations were insufficient. When I got a part-time job at 16 stocking shelves at the local grocery store, Frank laughed. "Minimum wage. That is your ambition." At 16, I was already flipping houses with money I had saved from mowing lawns. Even my academic achievements were dismissed. When I made honor roll, he responded, "Public school honor roll does not mean much in the real world. Trevor is being courted by Ivy League recruiters." Through it all, Grandma Mary remained my rock. "Your worth is not in your wallet, Burton," she would remind me. "It is in your character, in how you treat people, in the difference you make." I believed her, but Frank's constant belittling took its toll. I began to internalize some of his judgments, wondering if I truly lacked ambition or vision. Perhaps I was destined to struggle financially like my parents had. Perhaps that was simply my lot in life. What I could not see then was how carefully Grandma Mary was watching, observing, and making her own judgments, not about financial success, but about character, about who showed genuine care and who merely performed it, about who valued people for their worth as humans and who measured them by their bank accounts. And she was making plans that would one day shock us all. As I entered my senior year of high school, Grandma Mary's health began to decline. It started subtly. She tired more easily, napped more frequently in her armchair, occasionally forgot small details like where she had placed her reading glasses. I took on more household responsibilities without complaint, grateful for all she had done for me. I learned to cook her favorite meals, reminded her to take her medications, and drove her to doctor appointments after getting my license. Uncle Frank's involvement remained minimal and performative. He would call once a week, rarely visiting, except for the obligatory Sunday dinners. When he did visit, he spent more time criticizing her outdated home than asking about her health. "Mom, this place is falling apart," he declared during one visit, pointing out a water stain on the ceiling. "You should consider moving to Lakeview Shores Retirement Community. They have full medical staff activities, dining options. Much better than struggling to maintain this old house." What he did not acknowledge was that Lakeview Shores was one of his development properties, and moving there would cost nearly all of Grandma's savings. "I am comfortable here, Frank," she replied firmly. "Burton helps me with whatever I need." Frank glanced at me dismissively. Burton will be going to college soon. You cannot expect him to put his life on hold. Besides, what real help can he provide with serious medical issues? I bit my tongue knowing that I had been researching local colleges, specifically to stay near Grandma Mary. I had already been accepted to the University of Minnesota with a partial scholarship allowing me to live at home and continue supporting her. As her 75th birthday approached, Grandma's health took a more serious turn. She was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, requiring more medications and more frequent doctor visits. I adjusted my school schedule to accommodate her needs, sometimes missing classes to take her to specialists. Uncle Frank's response was predictable. This is exactly why she should be in a facility, not depending on a teenager. You are going to ruin your future playing Nurse Burton. What he failed to understand was that caring for Grandma did not feel like a burden, but a privilege. She had saved me after my greatest loss. Supporting her through her illness was the least I could do in return. During this period, I noticed Grandma had several private meetings with her attorney, Mr. Harrington, a kind older gentleman who had handled her legal affairs for decades. When I asked about these meetings, she simply patted my hand and said, "Just making sure everything is in order, dear. Nothing for you to worry about." By spring of my senior year, Grandma Mary was significantly weaker, but still determined to attend my graduation. Uncle Frank tried to dissuade her. "It will be hot, crowded, uncomfortable. Why put yourself through that when Burton can just bring you the diploma later?" But Grandma was adamant. "I have waited 18 years to see Burton graduate. Wild horses could not keep me away." On graduation day, I helped her into her best dress, a simple blue outfit she had worn to church for years. We arrived early to secure handicap parking, and I found her a shaded seat with a good view. The pride in her eyes as I received my diploma made all the struggles worthwhile. At the small celebration afterward at our home, Uncle Frank could not resist comparing my achievement to Trevor's upcoming graduation from his prestigious private school. Of course, Trevor has been accepted to Princeton. Full ride would have been nice, but the connections he will make there are worth every penny of tuition. I noticed Grandma Mary watching this interaction, carefully, her expression unreadable. That summer, I began taking classes at the University of Minnesota while working part-time at the campus bookstore. Grandma's condition stabilized somewhat with her medications, but she continued to weaken gradually. I arranged my schedule to be home when she needed me, prepared meals she could easily reheat, and called between classes to check on her. Uncle Frank's Sunday visits continued, though they became increasingly focused on his latest business ventures and decreasingly concerned with Grandma's well-being. He rarely asked how she was feeling, instead filling the air with tales of his success. "Just closed the deal on that office complex downtown," he announced one Sunday. 7 figures. "The market is booming if you know where to invest." I noticed how Grandma Mary would simply nod her eyes, watchful and assessing. As autumn approached, Grandma's health declined more rapidly. There were 2 hospitalizations in September alone. During the second stay, I remained at her side day and night, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, helping her eat, advocating with nurses when she needed pain medication. Uncle Frank visited once for 30 minutes, spending most of that time on his phone, handling a critical deal that apparently could not wait. After she returned home now, with oxygen and a hospital bed in the living room, Grandma Mary took my hand one evening while we watched the sunset through the window. "Burton," she said softly, "I want you to know how proud I am of the man you have become. Your parents would be too." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I learned from the best grandma. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Life will have surprises for you, Burton. Some good, some difficult. But I have faith in your ability to handle whatever comes your way." I did not know then that she was preparing me in her gentle way for both her absence and for something else entirely unexpected. In late October, just as the maple tree in our front yard reached its peak autumn glory, Grandma Mary passed away peacefully in her sleep. I found her in the morning, her face serene, her favorite book still open on the bedside table. The grief was overwhelming, a physical ache that seemed to hollow out my chest. She had been my anchor, my family, my home, since I was 7 years old. Now at 19, I faced the world without her steadying presence. Uncle Frank took charge of the funeral arrangements, overriding many of my suggestions. I know what Mom would have wanted, he insisted, though he had paid so little attention to her preferences in life. The service was larger and more elaborate than Grandma would have liked, with Frank using it as something of a networking opportunity, introducing himself to attendees as Mary's son, who handles high-end real estate, if you are ever in the market. During the reception afterward, he pulled me aside. "We need to talk about the house and Mom's affairs," he said, his tone businesslike. "Obviously, you will need to find an apartment near campus. I can help you look, but you will need to move quickly. I plan to fix up the house and put it on the market before winter really sets in." I stared at him, stunned by his presumption. "This is my home, Uncle Frank. Grandma would want me to stay here." He laughed, the sound condescending. "Burton, be realistic. You cannot afford the property taxes, let alone maintenance on a house this age. Besides, the house will need to be sold to settle Mom's estate. I am sure she left you something, but the bulk naturally would come to me as her only living child." Before I could respond, Mr. Harrington, Grandma's attorney, approached us. "Mr. Harrington," Walker Burton, "I am sorry to intrude. I wanted to let you know I have scheduled the reading of Mary's will for Thursday at 2 o'clock at my office. She was very specific about wanting both of you there together." Frank nodded briskly. "Of course we will be there." "Will it be just the three of us?" "Actually," Mr. Harrington replied, "Mary requested that Judge Wilson also be present. She was quite insistent on that point." This seemed to surprise Frank. "A judge? That seems unnecessary for what should be a straightforward matter." Mr. Harrington merely smiled. "Mary had her reasons. I will see you both on Thursday." As he walked away, Frank turned to me with a frown. "Strange. I cannot imagine why Mom would want a judge present. Probably just being overly cautious in her old age." I said nothing, but something about Mr. Harrington's expression had given me pause. There was something he knew that we did not, something important enough for Grandma Mary to ensure a judge would witness. Thursday arrived with a sense of finality. The reading of the will would mark the official end of Grandma Mary's affairs, the last formal acknowledgement of her passing. I dressed carefully in the one suit I owned, purchased for my high school graduation with Grandma's help. Uncle Frank arrived at Mr. Harrington's office in an expensive tailored suit, Aunt Diane beside him in designer morning wear. My cousins had not come, apparently uninterested in what they assumed would be a boring legal proceeding. Judge Wilson was already seated when we entered. A distinguished older woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. She nodded politely as we were introduced, but offered no explanation for her presence. As we settled into the leather chairs around Mr. Harrington's polished oak desk, Frank immediately took control of the conversation. "Before we begin, Gordon," he said, addressing the attorney by his first name, though they were merely acquaintances, "I want to discuss the timeline for settling the estate. I have some potential buyers already interested in Mom's property, and I would like to move quickly before the market cools for winter." Mr. Harrington glanced at Judge Wilson before responding. "Perhaps we should proceed with the reading first, Frank." Mary left very specific instructions. Frank waved a hand dismissively. Of course. I just want to make sure we are all on the same page about next steps. Burton will need to vacate the property within 30 days, I assume." "That seems reasonable." I felt my face flush with anger and grief. The casual way he discussed forcing me from the only home I had known for 12 years, mere days after Grandma's funeral, was breathtaking in its callousness. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. Let us proceed with the reading, shall we? He opened a leather folder and removed several documents. This last will and testament of Mary Elizabeth Walker revokes all previous wills and codicils. Being of sound mind and body, Mary has made the following declarations. Frank leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. He glanced at me with what appeared to be pity, as if already calculating the modest sum Grandma might have left her orphaned grandson, perhaps enough for a used car or first semester's textbooks, but certainly nothing substantial. Mr. Harrington continued through standard legal language about funeral expenses and outstanding debts before reaching the substantive provisions. Regarding my primary residence at 1423 Maple Street and all its contents, he read, these shall pass in their entirety to my grandson, Burton James Walker. Frank sat forward abruptly. What, Mr. Harrington continued without acknowledging the interruption. Regarding my financial assets, including bank accounts, investment portfolios, stock holdings, and insurance policies. Gordon Frank interrupted, his voice sharp. There must be some mistake. The house should pass to me as Mary's son. Burton is a college student. He cannot maintain a property. Judge Wilson spoke for the first time. Mr. Walker, please allow Mr. Walker, Harrington, to complete the reading without interruption. You will have an opportunity for questions afterward. Frank subsided, though his expression had darkened considerably. Mr. Harrington adjusted his glasses and continued. Regarding my financial assets, including bank accounts, investment portfolios, stock holdings, and insurance policies, the total value of which amounts to $3,100,000, as of the date of this will's execution. The room fell silent. I felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath me. $3 million. Grandma Mary, who clipped coupons and bought store-brand cereal, who drove a 10-year-old car and fretted over the electric bill. Frank had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing without sound. These assets, Mr. Harrington continued, I bequeath in their entirety to my grandson Burton James Walker. Frank shot to his feet. This is preposterous, completely absurd. Where would Mom get $3 million? And if by some miracle she had that kind of money, why would she leave it all to Burton instead of her own son? Mr. Harrington removed another document from the folder. Mary anticipated your concerns and prepared this letter to be read at this time. He handed the letter to me. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, recognizing Grandma's neat, precise handwriting. Would you like me to read it aloud, Mr. Harrington? Offered gently. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Mr. Harrington took the letter and began reading. My dearest Burton and Frank, if you are hearing this letter, then I have passed on from this world. I imagine you are both quite shocked by the details of my will, particularly the extent of my estate. The explanation is simple. Your grandfather Harold was an extremely prudent investor. When he passed, he left me well provided for, though I chose to continue living modestly. Over the years, those investments grew substantially. I continued his careful stewardship, living on my pension and Social Security, while allowing the portfolio to compound. As for my decision regarding the distribution of these assets, that too is simple. Throughout my later years, I observed how each of you responded to what you perceived as my limited means. Frank, you measured my worth, and everyone else's, by financial metrics alone. You saw my modest home as a reflection of failure rather than a choice. You viewed caring for Burton as a burden rather than the joy it truly was. You visited out of obligation, not love, and spent those visits boasting about your own wealth rather than connecting with me. Burton, you never saw me as a financial resource to be managed or exploited. You saw me as a person deserving of dignity, respect, and love. You arranged your life to support mine without complaint. You valued our time together over material gain. I leave my home and financial assets to Burton, not to punish you, Frank, but to reward the values I wish to perpetuate. Money is a tool, not a measure of human worth. Burton understands this, You never did. I hope someday you will come to see that the true wealth in life cannot be deposited in any bank. It exists in the connections we nurture, the kindness we extend, and the love we give freely without expectation of return. With enduring love despite our differences, your mother, Mary. The silence that followed was absolute. I sat stunned, tears streaming down my face, feeling Grandma's presence so strongly it was as if she were in the room with us. Frank's face had turned from pale to mottled red. This is manipulation. Undue influence. Burton must have pressured her when she was vulnerable and confused. I will contest this. Judge Wilson leaned forward. Mr. Walker, before you proceed down that path, you should know that Mary went to extraordinary lengths to establish her competency and the deliberate nature of her decisions. I personally met with her 3 times over the past year to evaluate her mental clarity and confirm her wishes. She underwent cognitive assessments with 2 separate geriatric specialists who documented her complete competence. Mr. Harrington nodded. Additionally, Mary maintained detailed records of all family interactions over the past 5 years, who visited, how long they stayed, what was discussed. She had witnesses document your statements about her home, her choices, and your cousin Burton. The case for undue influence would be exceptionally difficult to prove given this documentation. Frank turned to me, his expression venomous. You planned this all along, played the devoted grandson while manipulating her against me. I shook my head, still trying to process everything myself. Uncle Frank, I had no idea about any of this. Judge Wilson's voice was firm. Mr. Walker, I can personally attest that Burton was not aware of Mary's financial situation or her estate plans. She was explicit about maintaining that confidentiality until after her passing. Frank grabbed his coat, pulling Diane to her feet beside him. This is not over. Not by a long shot. As they stormed toward the door, Mr. Harrington called after them. Frank, you should also be aware that Mary included a provision that any challenge to her will result in the challenger being disinherited from the small bequest she did leave you, her collection of family photographs, and your father's pocket watch. Frank paused briefly in the doorway, his shoulders rigid with fury before continuing out without another word. Left alone with Mr. Harrington and Judge Wilson, I finally found my voice. I never knew about any of this. The money, her plans. Judge Wilson smiled kindly. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Burton. She told me she wanted you to have the freedom to pursue your passion for education without the financial struggles your parents faced. But she also wanted you to develop your character independently of wealth. Mr. Harrington nodded. She was quite strategic. She observed both you and Frank without the distortion wealth can create in relationships. She saw clearly who each of you truly was. I looked down at my hands, overwhelmed. What happens now? Now, Mr. Harrington said gently, you have some decisions to make, but you do not have to make them immediately. The house is yours, free and clear. The financial assets are well managed in a diverse portfolio. You have time to consider your path forward. As I left his office that day, stepping into the autumn sunshine with my world completely transformed, I felt both the weight of Grandma Mary's absence and the warmth of her final gift, not just financial security, but the knowledge that she had seen me, truly seen me, and found me worthy. True to his word, Uncle Frank did attempt to contest the will. He hired an aggressive attorney specializing in estate litigation who filed motions claiming everything from undue influence to diminished capacity. But just as Mr. Harrington and Judge Wilson had indicated, Grandma Mary had thoroughly documented her mental competence and her reasons for her estate decisions. The court proceedings were brief but intense. Frank's attorney presented a narrative of a manipulative grandson taking advantage of an elderly woman, while Mr. Harrington methodically dismantled each claim with Grandma's extensive documentation. The most powerful evidence was the series of video recordings Grandma had made with Judge Wilson present, clearly stating her wishes and her reasoning. I am making these decisions with full awareness and intention. Her voice rang out clearly in the courtroom. I have observed both Frank and Burton for years. This distribution reflects my values and my assessment of character, not any external pressure. When the judge dismissed Frank's case and ordered him to pay legal fees for bringing a frivolous lawsuit, something in my uncle seemed to break. The carefully maintained facade of success and superiority crumbled, revealing the insecurity beneath. In the courthouse hallway afterward, he confronted me one last time. "You have no idea how to handle that kind of money," he spat. "You will squander it within 5 years. When you do not come crawling to me." I looked at the uncle who had belittled me for most of my life and felt an unexpected sense of pity. This was never about the money for me, Uncle Frank. It was about Grandma. It always was. He stormed away, and that was the last meaningful interaction we had. He and his family moved to Arizona the following year for expanding business opportunities, though I later heard rumors of financial difficulties after several high-risk investments failed. Meanwhile, I had decisions to make about my own future. The first was easy. I would keep Grandma's house as my home. It needed some updates for energy efficiency and modern conveniences, but I was careful to preserve its character and warmth. The kitchen, where Grandma had taught me to bake apple pie. The living room, where we had watched old movies on Sunday afternoons. The backyard oak tree, with its tire swing. These were priceless to me. With Mr. Harrington's guidance, I established a financial plan that preserved the principle of Grandma's investments while allowing me to use a portion for education and meaningful projects. I completed my undergraduate degree in education without debt, then pursued a master's in educational leadership. But the most meaningful use of the inheritance came in the form of the Mary Walker Scholarship Foundation. I established it to provide college funding for students who had lost parents, children like me who faced both emotional and financial challenges in pursuing higher education. The foundation particularly focused on students who demonstrated compassion and service to others' values Grandma had exemplified and instilled in me. When I began teaching at a local high school, I never mentioned my financial situation. I lived comfortably, but not extravagantly, driving a reliable but modest car and dressing simply. My colleagues knew me as dedicated and hard-working, not as the young man who had unexpectedly inherited millions. 3 years after Grandma's passing, I met Sophia, a pediatric nurse, with a quick wit and gentle heart. Our relationship progressed naturally, built on shared values and genuine connection. When I finally told her about my financial situation, her response was perfect. "That explains why you never complain about the check when we go out to dinner," she joked, before growing serious. "Your grandmother sounds like an amazing woman. I wish I could have met her." "She would have loved you," I told her honestly. When we married the following year in a simple ceremony in Grandma's backyard, now our backyard, I felt her presence strongly. The oak tree had been strung with fairy lights, and the garden she had tended for decades provided the flowers for the centerpieces. As Sophia and I built our life together, we made decisions based on the values Grandma Mary had taught me. We lived well within our means, contributed to causes we believed in, and eventually welcomed our daughter, whom we named Mary Elizabeth, in honor of the woman whose wisdom continued to guide us. On my daughter's first birthday, a surprising package arrived. It contained the family photographs and my grandfather's pocket watch, the items Grandma had left to Uncle Frank, along with a brief note. "Burton, I was wrong. Mom knew what she was doing. The watch belongs with your family now." Frank, it was not an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement. I wrote back thanking him and included a photo of baby Mary with the pocket watch carefully held in her tiny hands. He never responded, but the gesture itself suggested some evolution in his thinking. 5 years after Grandma's passing, the Mary Walker Scholarship Foundation had helped 37 students attend college. I kept a wall in my home office dedicated to their photos and stories, adding new ones each year. Sometimes, when facing a difficult decision, I would look at those faces and ask myself what Grandma would advise. The money itself proved to be both a blessing and a responsibility. It provided security and opportunities, but the greatest gift remained Grandma Mary's love and the values she had instilled in me long before I knew about any inheritance. The knowledge that she had seen who I truly was beneath circumstances and without the distortion wealth can create remains my most treasured inheritance. In a world that often measures worth by financial metrics, Grandma Mary taught me to measure it by how we treat others, especially when there seems to be no benefit to ourselves. She showed me that character reveals itself not in grand gestures, but in daily choices made when no one seems to be watching, though sometimes someone very wise is observing more carefully than we realize. Have you ever been underestimated by family members who thought they were better than you? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. If this video made you think about the true meaning of wealth and family, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about justice and unexpected twists of fate. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their worth is not determined by their bank account. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the quietest people in the room are observing everything, and true wealth is measured by how you treat others when there seems to be nothing to gain.